There's a lot of people who are really confused about the stat weights of of an item, and they're confused about how to determine whether or not a piece of gear is an upgrade. One of the things you need to understand is that every single one of these stats that you see here has a different weight to it. It literally has a different amount of value to your character, to the ability of your character to do its job. And it all depends on your spec, your class, the way your class is played. Some things have, really a lot of value to haste because you really want to fit as many casts into a small amount of time as possible, or you want your tick rates to go really high. Others have passive abilities that make anything, that you crit with do like extra percentage of damage. Some have, like mastery is the number one because, like, for example, a marksman hunter, every percentage of mastery gives 4% bonus damage. So that's very valuable for the marksman hunter. Um, like for tanks, versatility is usually pretty high on the list because it increases the damage that you do, but also decreases the damage that you take. And if you have any sort of self healing, it increases the healing you do. So you're hitting the trifecta of versatility there. You also have your primary stat, which is your agility if you're a hunter or a rogue. It's intellect if you're a caster. Strength if you're like a melee DK or like a warrior. So that's your primary stat. And what you have is you'll have a stat amount, right? So let's say you have 1250 crit on something, right? If crit is worth 1 point for every actual point in stats that you have, the coefficient on that would be 1, and you would take the coefficient times the stat amount, and the actual value of that stat would be 1250 to you. Now, let's say crit is only worth 0.85, so that means that 1250 points in the stat is only worth 1062 and a half actual points for the score of the gear. What we're looking for is a total overall score of the gear, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to sum up this entire column at the end of the day, right? Now, the sum of this column is the score that you get based on the coefficients and all the values, when you're multiplying it across. But every single piece of gear has a certain stat budget as well. So, like, let's say you have something that has 650 haste and 1250 crit with no mastery, no versatility, because there's only ever going to be two things on there. And let's say it has 1150 of your primary stat, right? And we could also we could insert stamina in here because just about everything has stamina, and let's say it's got 1200 stam as well. So the overall stat budget for this item would be 4250. Now that 4250 is going to be based on the item level of the item. So like an item level, let's say let's say a 665 or I'm sorry 865 item is going to have a higher stat budget than an 840, right? They determine the total stat budget based on item level. There's a certain mathematical formula they use. Say, okay, for an 840 item, it's going to have, let's just say 800, let's just say 10 times the amount. It's going to have 8,400 total stats, but this one's going to have 8,650 total stats. That's not the actual values. I'm just using that as an example to illustrate the difference. So when you get an item level upgrade, what you're actually getting is a stat budget upgrade. The total stat budget here is going to be right, this thing here, right? So your stat budget is your total amount of all stats across the entire item. But all of those, not all stats are, made the same. So what you have is for a certain class, the crit may be worth not as much, but for other classes, crit may be worth a lot more. This means that, let's say that two different people have the exact same piece for their boots, right? Let's say it's a resto shaman versus a marksman hunter. They both have the exact same boots on, and a pair of boots drops. Who should get the item? Well, the better upgrade would be the person where the stats matter more for that person. And so what you'd have across the board here is this, these weights, like this may be 1.15, this may be 1.3, this may be 0.65, it's not worth very much. Let's just say that's 1, the primary stat is worth 1.25, right? So mastery is just edging out the primary stat, and what we can do is we can just copy this formula across. And so what you end up with is, okay, 1150 of the primary stat is actually worth 1438 points for that piece of gear towards its total stat value, right? And so you end up with just this total, right? So if we wanted to actually look at something like, I have a Resto Druid here, right? And for the Resto Druid, I have my critical strike is 0.65. It's worth 0.65 there. Haste is worth 0.75. My primary stat is the baseline. That's 1. So everything's based off, it's around the primary stat. It's based off of its relative value to the primary stat. Mastery is 0.55. Versatility is 0.4. So you can see I'm favoring haste, but crit is also very valuable. Mastery is important as well. Versatility not so much, right? And we don't have to worry about stamina. Stamina is not worth anything. Who cares about that right now? We could, I saw a pawn string once, or a stat weight string had it valued as 0.01, so it's like, oh boy, I get a little bit more stamina there. So let's actually take a look at a piece of gear that I have. Let's see, I have a, let's see if I can find one that I have another in. I have a few rings, I think. Yeah, let's compare my two rings. I have a ring that is an 885 Heroic Titan forged. It's got crit and versatility on it. It is the primary. There is no primary stat, so we don't have anything there. It has 1592 stamina. It has 1530 in the crit. It has 0 haste, and it has versatility. So 1148 versatility, right? So we have a total value of 1469. Uh, so let's say we found another ring that was exactly the same item level, so therefore exactly the same stat budget of 4270. Now keep in mind this is an 885 ring here, right? So we can actually say how many points per item level. It's 4.82 points per item level there. So we have an 885 ring. And let's say instead of versatility, we had mastery. Now let's keep in mind that we have this 1469.2. Let's just copy this and paste it down here, right? I want to make sure you can still see that. Right, okay, cool. Now let's say that 1148 points in versatility was instead in haste. Holy cow. Because I'm multiplying 1148, oh wait, let's get rid of that. Because I'm multiplying the 1148 by 0.75, it's adding 861 points to my total. Whereas up here, the 1148 is multiplied times 0.4, so it's only giving me 459.2 towards my total. So you can see the difference here. We could actually take this minus that, and we can see that this one is worth 401.8 points less than the other. If I had better stats on my gear, because I'm going with my number 1 stat rather than my number 4, that would be a definite upgrade, even though it's the same item level, 885. Well, now let's take a look and compare the 885 up here. I have another ring, right? And let me see, the other ring is an 860, right? That is a versatility mastery ring. It's 860. So if we look here, 860, right? That versatility mastery ring is it's got, because it's 860, it has a lot less stam, 1261, right? It has 854 versatility and 1447 mastery and 00 there, and so you can see that it is not as valuable as the 885. And so, of course, that's that's not an upgrade. It's 59 levels less, and you're losing 300 points total. And so, of course, there's that. Now, what we can do to do a little bit more apples to apples comparison, just to illustrate the point, is we can look in our dungeon journal, and we go. I'm actually in my other window. I'm looking at loot here for raids. Let's look at just Emerald Nightmare. Let's look at just Nithendra. We can look at the loot and say, okay, on heroic, we have a waist piece. Let's use the feet. Okay, we have some feet here. They are 865, right? They have 1174 intellect, 1761 stamina. We have 0 here. 450 haste, 637 mastery, 0 crit. So based on these item levels, or based on these stat weights, you see how we're turning 450 stats into 337.5 points for this, the total score of this piece of gear. 637 mastery turns into 350 points. The stamina is only like 17.61, but the primary stat we have 1174 because our primary stat gives us our base amount of healing done per spell cast. It's just that mastery and haste allows us to get more of them out, and like our rejuvenations tick faster, that kind of thing, and that's why it's worth so much. Mastery is worth 350.35 points there, so we have a total of 1879. So let's actually bump that up to mythic, and let's see. It's the same piece of gear, right? But it's 880, right? And so our primary stat is 1351. The stamina is 2026. There is no versatility on it. Mastery is going to be 673. So you see how there's a difference in mastery of about 40 points. Well, 40, yeah, about 35 points. And the haste is at 476, right? So all the stats are in, and we can see how there's a difference of 218.95 points. You can see how it's an upgrade. But let's take a look at, instead, let's go back to heroic. Let's get a 665 piece that has different stats, right? We already have our primary stat, but it's the lesser of the two primary stats. It's about 45% of it. Let's find another piece of foot gear that we can put on that was from the same exact raid. Let's see if there's another one that we can find. There might be. Maybe not. There we go. From Xavius, there's Boots of Endless Betrayal. Those are haste crit, and they have a lot more haste than crit. So we're back to 865, right? And we don't have, we have 706 haste. There's no mastery. The amount of stamina, hey, look, it's 1761. See, there's that stat budget thing. The intellect is 1174 still, because it's, same item level. All it's doing is redistributing these stats to be different than the other ones. So notice how we have 4022 here, 4021 here. We actually have one less point, one fewer point in our total stat budget for 865. I keep on putting 665 for some reason, right? But you see how crit is worth a little bit more than mastery is. Although we're dumping a little, we had 637 of a stat that is worth not so much, and we're trading it in for other stats, right? If we were to sum up this, that's 1086, right? 7 plus 3 is 10, then 86. So we have a total of these stats of 10 of our secondary stats is 1086 total here. Hey, look, 6 plus 4 is 10, 5 plus 3 is 8, 7. So we have 1087 points there. It's just a rounding error there. So we have the same amount of total secondary stats because our primary stat and our stamina is the same across the board. It's just redistributing these this 1086 or 1087 points across different stats, and they have different weights. So we have more of our best stat we have some of our second best stat and none of our third, as opposed to having a little bit of our main stat, none of our second best stat, and a lot of our third best. So of course this is an upgrade, and there's a difference of 88.65 points there. It's a minor upgrade, but it is still an upgrade. And so that's how stat budgeting works, and that's why you have things that are best in slot, even though they're the same item level. Now here's the cool thing. You may end up with, I'm just going to copy and paste these now. Let's just say you have two different stat weight scores. This one is for the stat weight score I use for raiding, right? Because in a raid, crit is more important than mastery because you're spreading your hots around. This is for resto druids, right? But for mythic pluses and 5-man groups, you have different weights because it's a different environment where you're stacking up your hots on top of each other, which is playing into your mastery a lot more. What that means is that the coefficients change. For crit, it's still 0.65. For haste, it's 0.675. And for mastery, it's 0.75, right? Versatility is 0.55. And so we still have stamina at 0.01, and the primary stat is still at 1. So, if we have the same item, this item is actually worth more in dungeons than in raids. See how it's worth 1973. It's the same item, but it's more valuable for 5-man groups than it would be for a raid. So if your goal is to be doing 5-man mythic pluses, you want to hold on to this piece of gear for those purposes, right? So now that we have these, we have different stat weights for that. Let's actually compare them now for those two items that we had before, and go back to those other feet, right? And we're going to go back and put the 706, no mastery, and 380 crit. And you can see now that the feet off of Nithendra are actually better for your 5-man dungeons. So in this case, you'd want to hold on to both of these pairs of boots and swap them out. You'd use the Nithendra boots for your 5-man dungeons, and you'd use the Xavius boots for your raiding. So you can see that this is a very valuable thing to understand and know. To know how budgeting works, the stat budgeting, and to know how stat weights work so that you can get this whole thing figured out. Now, here's the cool thing. I'm going to go over to my WoW window here, and you can actually see my WoW window. Oops, I just moved it around. If I go to my stat weight score add-on, weights, right, you can see I have Resto Raid and Resto Dungeon. And I have all these stat weights that I put into the spreadsheet, and they're all here, right? I also have a balance spec and a bear tank spec. And I hope you can see this okay. Let's go into that gear here, and we can see this is what I was looking at here. You see how the stained maggot squishers, those are the Nithendra ones. See how it says for Resto Raid it's at 0.06, right? Negative, and it's in the red, but it's better for dungeons, 0.33 in the green. So it's a plus 0.33%. So that means it's an upgrade. My total score for it for raid is 1861. Now if we look at the Xavius feat, 1950, right? See how it's 1950 there for the Resto Raid, the top one. It's up 66.55 better than what I have. I have these 860 boots that kind of suck. The boots of Endless Betrayal, right? From normal, but they're Warforged. They're 860. So they are the Xavius boots. They're just 5 item levels less. But the Nithendra boots here, if I got an 865 version of the Nithendra boots, they would be not as good as the Warforged 860 boots that I have. And so you can see how it's automatically adding it all up, giving me the total stat weights, the stat weight score, the total value of all the stats multiplied by their coefficients, all summed up into a single score to give you an idea of how valuable that piece of gear is for you. Now, the thing you need to understand about this whole thing is that it's They have different values for different specs, different environments, and you need to set all of those up on a case-by-case basis. Most classes and specs don't have to worry about it, though. I mean, like if you're um, my main is a marksman hunter, it's just a single stat weight calculation for all of them. But you can see here how, like, let's say I was to, let's just look at the scores. The resto rate is 1861.85 here, and for these it's 1950. So that's 90 plus 90 points or so. So if I had these 865s, and I got these 865s, I would want to upgrade. But you notice the Resto Dungeon one is 1915.16 on these, but on the Nithendra, it's 1973.11. So for dungeons, it's bearing out the truth. I mean, this is a plus 124.4 from what I have, but this one is only a plus 66. So the Nithendra boots are better for my Resto Dungeon spec. So yeah, this means don't throw away your gear because it may be good depending on where you are, and understand your spec and understand your stat weights, and get this stat weight score add-on. If you look in your interface, stat weight score here, stat weight score version 751, and install it. Go to your stat weights, and you need to input all of these things, and you can find pawn strings all around the internet to do it. You can tweak it however you think is necessary. Whatever advanced users will kind of tweak it on their own and kind of say, I'm not so convinced that that's the case. But yeah, that gives you an idea of how to properly evaluate your gear so that you know what is really better for you in what situation. Um, so I hope this has helped you. As always, good luck, have fun. Give me a like on the YouTube button there, and subscribe if you want more WoW training and more in-depth understanding of how this game works. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.